"54%, ma'am," he stated, clarifying that half the country would gladly sacrifice an appendage to uncover her wealth formula. The true problem, though, was that average Americans cannot vote on the exact same laws as she does. The room grew entirely hushed. Nancy Pelosi sat remarkably motionless, her fingers gently intertwined, preserving her iconic dignity precisely as she had always done. But the joyful look she carried when she walked in lost its life, solidifying on her face like a painted picture. Lying on the table in front of John Kennedy was a single sheet of paper. It was a solitary page displaying a few typed words at the top edge and one giant number printed at the bottom. And Kennedy gently rested 2 fingers on it, similar to securing a shop receipt from blowing away in the breeze. He observed, with a surprisingly soft tone, that her statement was located near the top, while her financial gain was situated at the bottom. He explained he hadn't made either detail up, but simply positioned them on the identical piece of paper, truthfully admitting that the 2 pieces of information appeared to hate being positioned next to each other. To understand how the most powerful woman in the history of the House of Representatives became the butt of a joke delivered by a man she had brushed off only an hour earlier as a simple, barefoot philosopher doing a populist routine for people without investment accounts, we have to go back about 40 minutes. We must return to the second Nancy Pelosi walked into that room, completely certain her presence still dominated the space just as it had for 3 decades. She felt equally sure that the slow-talking man sitting across from her was totally undeserving of her full attention. She had managed to outlast 6 different presidents and dozens of individuals who falsely thought they were smarter than her. She held the unique skill to count political votes that no one else could see and could keep a political group united with just a sharp look. She had earned her supreme confidence, but the fundamental weakness of 30 years of absolute certainty is that it builds massive blind spots, and it never occurred to her that a man owning a fishing boat and a single piece of paper had spent his drive to work visualizing her exact behavior, this specific situation, and exactly how deliberately he would time his confrontation. The hearing room was packed to the brim that morning. This was mostly because this upcoming clash had been highlighted in all the political newsletters moving through Washington over the prior week. The capital city routinely gathers to watch a political fight. The planned topic was incredibly boring. A legislative review regarding rules for financial transparency, which usually makes people leave the room. However, whispers had spread that Kennedy planned to question Pelosi directly on this matter, changing the entire mood. This shifted the dynamic because one side featured the undisputed female leader of her party, a figure who had held the speaker's position twice and controlled a difficult group for 2 decades. The other side featured a Louisiana senator who constantly called himself a simple country attorney, using the same misleading voice as a card trickster claiming ignorance of poker. Pelosi entered like a queen, showing up last, moving without any rush, and wearing a cream-colored suit that cost more than several cars sitting in the employee parking area. She took her seat as though the chair had waited its whole life for this exact honor. She rested a thin leather folder on the table. She did not pour her own water, instead letting a staff member do it. When the head of the committee officially gave her the floor for her opening statement, she gave a small, graceful nod, the movement of someone fully used to being thanked just for showing up. She started by expressing gratitude to the chairman and pledging to be quick, stating that the topic was much simpler than some people wanted to make it seem. Her voice was smooth, cultured, and filled with the exact kind of exhausted patience a grown-up uses when trying to explain something to a baby for the second time in a row. She stated that in certain corners of the political world, there is a deep, persistent anger towards success, a political tactic driven by envy. She asserted this storyline persuades citizens that anybody with huge wealth must have done something illegal, that having money proves you are a criminal, and that the only way to help working-class families is to tear down anybody who has built something worthwhile. She let her eyes drift briefly toward Kennedy, and the corners of her mouth turned up. She pointed out that while this is an attractive story that plays incredibly well in certain rural town halls, It requires absolutely no real understanding of how financial markets actually function. She added, "This was quite convenient since the people pushing this story usually have no such knowledge." A quiet rumbling moved through the audience, and it was clearly not a sound of agreement. Pelosi pressed on, catching her stride and feeling confident in her position, claiming she had spent her whole life serving the public instead of amassing riches. She declared she would absolutely refuse to be lectured on money matters by a man who supposedly loves playing the part of a shoeless, backwoods thinker for the TV audiences. She admitted that while this performance might be amusing and very sweet, being sweet is definitely not the same as being informed, and having a Southern accent cannot take the place of truly understanding what a stock option is. She maintained that while certain people understand how the modern economy works, others just put on a show for voters who find real facts a bit too complicated to handle. She paused for a second, changing her voice to sound caring, which ultimately felt to everyone listening across the country except her loyal fans like a patronizing pat on the head. She clearly stated she had real sympathy for those specific people, making sure her pity was obvious. She said she understood that when someone is stressing over their food bills, the complex world of the stock market can sound like a foreign language. She recognized it is tempting to blame an easy villain, but claimed that real leadership means delivering hard truths instead of feeding into people's angry complaints. She described leadership as understanding the system well enough to use it properly, even if that skill looks like an unfair advantage to someone who doesn't understand it. This was a shocking thing to say on a live microphone, even for her. She had basically told the watching audience, one by one, that they were infected with envy, that they were unintelligent, that they couldn't understand economics, and finally, that they should be very thankful for her deep pity regarding these three flaws. She had described 40 years of incredible personal financial success as merely understanding the system, practically daring anyone watching to call it what it really was. In just 3 minutes, she had told millions of Americans watching from break rooms, kitchen tables, and trucks that they were unsophisticated, envious people, too slow to figure out the financial world, and easily tricked by a politician with a similar accent. She delivered this using the soothing, slightly arrogant rhythm of a woman who decided long ago she was the only responsible adult in the room. Moreover, she was completely sure her speech had worked perfectly. It had indeed worked, but she had simply forgotten to check who was holding the piece of paper. If you have ever been told by a rich person in a wildly expensive outfit that you aren't rich because you aren't smart enough to understand money, and that your complaints are just hidden jealousy, you need to hit that like button immediately, because Nancy Pelosi just said exactly that to your face on live television with a smile. Stay tuned, because the country lawyer she just called nothing more than sweet is holding a single paper that is about to ruin her day. John Kennedy showed zero emotion, which was the first mistake Pelosi made about who he was, and it definitely wouldn't be her last. He stayed in his chair with his glasses slid down his nose, just like people said he did, his fingers laced together over the single document, letting her insulting words pass by him like a bad smell coming from the hallway. He had been talked down to by seasoned experts previously. When the committee leader gave him his turn, he didn't reach for an angry comeback. Instead, Kennedy thanked the Madam Speaker, his Louisiana voice rolling out as slow and friendly as a front porch in July. He expressed gratitude for her remarks, saying she was totally right about his character, and praised her for doing her homework. He agreed he was indeed sweet, causing a ripple of laughs from his political friends. He also agreed with her statement that he didn't understand the stock market, confessing he kept most of his money in a credit union in Baton Rouge that sometimes gave him a complimentary toaster. He shared that his biggest financial move was buying a fishing boat, a choice his wife was still mad about, which brought even bigger laughs from the crowd. Because of this, he announced he would need her help today since she was the proven expert. As she had just announced herself while he was just a regular guy with a boat he couldn't really pay for, he expressed a wish to talk about some exact numbers, specifically her numbers, and nicely asked her to help a simple guy understand them. Pelosi gave a stiff smile, saying she was always happy to teach. Kennedy replied he was hoping she'd say that, warning her to get ready because they were going to need a lot of teaching. The core reality about a man like Kennedy is that his slow speed is his main weapon. People watch him waiting for his final point, not realizing that making them wait was the actual goal and that he was slowly walking them exactly where he wanted them to go while they thought he was just rambling. Kennedy suggested beginning with a simple fact about her family's stock market trades from the prior year. He explained how he had asked a very smart junior worker, a young lady much brighter than him, to pull the public financial records. He shared that this worker told him Pelosi's investments shot up by roughly 54% over the past year. He looked over his glasses, his face completely friendly, saying the number 54 again. He stated he had to ask his worker to explain it more because his mind couldn't handle such complicated math. The worker then told him that the whole stock market, mainly the giant S&P index, went up by about 23% during that same time, a number that professionals view as an incredibly good year. He stopped for a careful second. He then summarized that the Madam Speaker didn't just beat the regular market, she almost doubled its speed in one single year, starting from zero. Pelosi's smile dropped a notch as she explained that her husband handles their money. She protected him as a veteran professional, an investment expert with decades of real-world knowledge, and she strictly reminded the senator that there is nothing wrong or illegal about a regular citizen making smart investments. Kennedy threw up a hand, looking truly shocked that she would think he meant that, promising her he was definitely not claiming anyone broke the rules. Instead, he explained he was saying the outcomes were incredibly amazing, guessing her family must be the most fortunate household in the whole United States of America. He said the 54% number again. He compared this by sharing his credit union gave him a measly 4% profit the year before, saying this small win made him feel like a rich billionaire. He joked about calling his wife to announce they were basically rich, and she told him to sit down before he hurt himself. He pointed out his 4% profit compared to her massive 54%, noting she made 10 times the money as the slow guy from Baton Rouge. Furthermore, he pointed out she did this amazing thing from a desk inside the US. Congress, during her free time, while also managing the nation, a comment that caused the room to laugh. He stated he was simply trying to understand the incredible brilliance of it. He politely suggested that if her family has the power to beat the market average by 2 times every year, he couldn't figure out what on earth she was doing working in Congress. He hinted she could be the wealthiest woman on earth, saying Wall Street would pull a giant truck full of cash right up to her front steps. He clearly asked why she would throw away such an amazing talent on a government paycheck. Pelosi claimed the senator was asking a purposely stupid question. Kennedy happily nodded, calling himself a purposely stupid man and requesting she indulge him by detailing exactly where a government worker learns to pick winning stocks like that. Watch his method closely. He doesn't make any direct attacks. He is only giving her compliments. He is calling her a mastermind and saying she is the luckiest lady alive, but every single phrase cuts like a blade because everyone watching at home is doing the calculations. He is comparing his 4% bank profit against the speaker's 54%. If this situation is getting your heart pumping, type the single word lucky in the comments. Do exactly that, because the time has come for him to flip the document over. Pelosi opened her mouth to say something cold and permanent, but Kennedy pulled a trick no one in the room anticipated. He lifted the single piece of paper, and he didn't shake it around or get loud. He just read the words printed across the top margin. He named these quotes as her own statements. From a speech, she had delivered a solid speech, he added, saying he read the whole thing and thought it was okay. He spoke slowly and respectfully. He read her saying that a solid middle class is the foundation of our success, and he pointed out her demand for tax changes that would guarantee all citizens pay their fair share. He placed the paper down. He praised that lovely thought, showing real agreement that the richest should pay their fair share and the middle class is the foundation, stating he would vote for those words himself. Then he touched the bottom of the document where the one giant number was placed. He named this as her second number, 54%, from basically the exact same year. He glanced up, his face showing pure, honest confusion, a guy truly attempting to make two pieces fit. He described that this was where a rural attorney gets confused. He highlighted that the woman who delivers speeches about the richest paying their fair share and the family that beat the whole stock market by 2 times from inside the US Congress are the exact same woman. He admitted he couldn't get the statement at the top of the document to shake hands with the digit at the bottom, pointing out they kept turning away from each other. The first genuine laugh escaped then, echoing up from the balcony. A guy wearing a farming hat covered his face with his hand. Next to him, a lady who had arrived doubtful, with her arms crossed, the sort who doubts all politicians naturally, was nodding currently, slowly, because the math had made sense to her as well. That was the truth about the two figures. They didn't require a political party, and they didn't require a team. A lecture about equality, and a profit that doubled the market, resting on the same document in the same year belonging to one person. Anyone could understand it, and everyone did. Pelosi reacted the way she always reacted when things got shaky, which was to sit up straighter and become more freezing and royal, trying to make the crowd feel that laughing was beneath the respect of the position she held. She declared she would state this one time, and the coldness of it could have frozen a window. She stated that every financial move in her home had been totally and correctly reported following the exact letter of the law. She repeated, her spouse is a skilled money manager, and said she found it entirely expected and insulting that a victorious female cannot gather money in America without a guy pointing at her and implying with a country smile that she had to have broken the rules. She stated she had spent 4 decades being looked down upon by guys just like the senator, telling him she was accustomed to it. It was a powerful tactic that had succeeded 1,000 times prior, claiming jealousy, claiming sexism, building a fortress of pride. For a second, the crowd swayed with her. Journalists' pens scribbled, the laughing faded away, and the old habit washed through the room the practiced urge to step away from a strong female claiming unfair treatment. It lasted for roughly 20 seconds. Then Kennedy stopped playing nice for the first time, and the country rhythm remained in his speech, but something solid and sharp emerged beneath it. He warned the Madam Speaker that he wished to be very cautious because she had forced words into his mouth, and he did not enjoy how they tasted. He maintained he never said she cheated, and he hadn't said a single time that she violated a rule. He pointed out she constantly told him her investments were lawful, and he trusted her entirely. He leaned closer, naming this as the section she was wishing nobody would see. He concurred they were lawful, but asked who drafted the Stock Act, the legislation that dictates what a congressional representative can and cannot do with investments. He replied that Congress did. She and her allies drafted the rule book for their very own match. His tone remained steady as he detailed that when she claims she obeyed the rules, he believes her, but she assisted in writing those exact rules. He provided a comparison. It is not difficult to remain inside a boundary when you are the person who got to choose where to build the boundary. A guy can be the most law-abiding person in the region if he drafts the legislation in the morning and lives his life in the afternoon. He repeated she did not violate the law. She had it sized, snipped, and sewn to match the way a skilled clothes maker does a jacket. He scolded her for standing up and announcing to people she is perfectly legal, like that ends the argument, as if the regulations dropped from the clouds instead of from a meeting room down the corridor. He exposed the secret. The regulations are not a boundary someone constructed around her. They are a boundary she constructed around herself, containing a door. And she possesses the only key, while continuously telling everyone how carefully she stays within it. The chuckle that erupted next was biting, and Pelosi's jaw raised a fraction of an inch. She was accustomed to laughing in a space. She had been the reason for it, the victim of it, and the controller of it for more time than most of the audience had been breathing. However, this was a separate kind of laughing, and she recognized the change the way a boatman recognizes a shift in the breeze. This wasn't the sound of folks enjoying her, it was the sound of folks who were no longer amazed. He had just stated it clearly. She didn't violate the regulations. She drafted them, then existed by them, then requested an award for remaining within the boundary she constructed. If that is the most honest thing you have heard regarding Washington all year, leave one word in the comments, tailored. Just that single word, because the senator wasn't finished. And the next item he read concerned a vote that silently never occurred. He just stated what everyone had considered for decades: you cannot cheat when you are also the umpire. If that made sense, send this to one individual who is exhausted of seeing the people who draft the legislation get wealthy from them. Then return, because the senator had one final number, and this one concerned a vote that never took place. Proceeding with the topic of the rulebook, Kennedy continued as relaxed as a Sunday, proposing to share a brief tale because he enjoys a solid mystery. A couple of years ago, some decent people in Congress from both sides united and drafted a very basic piece of legislation. It declared that lawmakers and their husbands or wives should not be permitted to buy and sell specific stocks whatsoever, removing the entire issue from consideration and stopping the questions regarding 54% returns. He rubbed his jaw, acting like a man remembering something, and pointed out that the legislation gained momentum, cleared the committee, and folks were thrilled. However, then it simply disappeared. It never reached the main floor, never received its chance to be voted on, and perished quietly in a hidden room. He glanced up, pretending to be uneducated, and requesting assistance concerning whose responsibility it was for a very long time to determine which legislation reached the main floor and which pieces perished quietly in a hidden room. He inquired who possessed that gavel. Pelosi remained silent, since everybody in the chamber understood whose responsibility that had been. Kennedy quietly mumbled about the strange universe. He pointed out that the single piece of legislation in the entirety of Washington that would have prevented the 54%, the single piece of legislation that would have ended the entire issue permanently, somehow could locate its way to the main floor year after year. The individual who determined which legislation reached the floor and which pieces silently failed is the exact same individual whose family happened to be recording 54% returns. He sarcastically stated he was confident that was a random chance, claiming he trusts in random chances. He simply had never in his existence witnessed one remain so motionless and look so beautiful for the photographers. Down the platform, a young Democratic member, one of the fresh reformers who had campaigned pledging to fix exactly this issue, moved toward her microphone. She didn't protect Pelosi. Rather, she deliberately announced for the official record that many of them had desired to prohibit lawmakers from stock trading for a long time. She stated it ought to have occurred ages ago, and the reality that it hasn't is not a fact this political group should be happy about. She then leaned back. This tiny, intentional gap, one Democrat refusing to sync with another, communicated more than any speech could. When an assistant behind Pelosi mumbled something, and Pelosi grabbed once more for the words of victimhood concerning a successful female being targeted, a female lawmaker on Kennedy's side stopped it. She announced with politeness that she is a female who created some wealth of her own, and the digit on that document does not have a man or woman hiding behind it. She proclaimed that targeting a successful female is disrespectful to every female who truly created something the truthful, gradual way without a position on the group that drafts the regulations. She warned against doing that because it was lower than her. Pelosi's fingers shifted very slightly on the desk. Kennedy allowed the chamber to calm down, and then his tone shifted, sinking deeper and slower as the joking disappeared from it. The audience leaned forward to listen. He announced he wished to cease being humorous for a moment because there is a piece of this that the people at home sense in their stomachs, and they have the right to hear someone state it clearly. He placed his palm flat next to the document. He continuously returned to the 54%, not because it was illegal, but due to who it excluded. He stopped. He talked about a lady in Monroe, Louisiana, who labored 38 years at a medical center. She performed everything correctly. She hoarded her money, placed a little into her pension fund every single month, and never skipped even the months it was painful. She cut out discount tickets so she could continue contributing. During the prior year, the greatest year the financial markets had seen recently, she earned her 4 or perhaps 5%. Still, she couldn't sleep regardless because the cost of food consumed the majority of it, and she is terrified the funds will vanish before she passes away. She possesses a figure in her mind where she can ultimately quit laboring, and every single year that figure moves farther out of reach. She is unable to understand why, because she is performing everything they ever instructed her to do. His tone sank as he announced she followed the actual regulations drafted for ordinary citizens, and she received 4% and a tight feeling in her gut. The chamber had become incredibly silent. He observed that up here, from one of the most authoritative chairs that decides the fate of the exact businesses inside the investments, the family receives 10 times what the lady received. Concurrently, the woman in that chair delivers lectures regarding how the rules are stacked against laborers. He nodded his head slowly, announcing, "That is the piece that isn't humorous." He informed the Madam Speaker she is not participating in the identical game as that lady in Monroe, and she is not on the identical playing ground. She is participating in a game where she assisted in drafting the regulations from a chair the second lady will never occupy, possessing details she will never acquire, and then delivers her a lecture regarding equality. He explained, "The lady is not jealous. Rather, she is simply exhausted of being informed the individuals who stacked the deck care about her the most. She is capable of doing the math, comparing 4 and 54. It is the single thing no one ever needed to educate her on because she already understood it deep down." No one chuckled at that statement, and no one applauded. It reached a place deeper than either reaction. He simply stated the reality regarding the woman in Monroe with her 4% and the tightness in her gut. If you are that individual who has performed everything correctly and observed the individuals who draft the legislation become wealthy while you struggle to survive, you comprehend precisely what he implies. Subscribe immediately because there is roughly a minute remaining, and the manner it concludes with one tiny action she performs with her own arm is the segment the recording devices will never quit repeating. Pelosi attempted to bounce back using the only method she understood, which was to rise up using the power of a lifetime of pride. She raised her jaw, located her booming voice that had kicked off massive events, and commenced speaking regarding a lifetime of government duty, the burdens of being a leader, and how the future would recall who battled for laboring households. However, the chamber had transformed, and she was much too intelligent not to notice it transforming beneath her. The booming voice tumbled into a quietness that no longer swelled up to support it. Journalists had ceased scribbling, and her peers had discovered a complete obsession with the wood patterns of the desk. The rhythm she had relied on her entire existence to command a chamber was commanding nobody currently, fading away phrase by phrase, akin to an ocean wave withdrawing from the sand. The most terrible aspect the cameras recorded was that she continued anyway, grasping for the next booming phrase because the act was all there had ever been. To cease acting now meant confessing there had never been anything beneath the act except a digit on a document. Kennedy allowed her to continue all the way to the finish, which served as its own specific type of judgment. Once she had finished, he pushed the solitary piece of paper a couple of inches over the desk in her direction. He admitted she had aided the citizens for a long duration, and no one can remove those 40 years from her record. He allowed it to rest. It's just that somewhere in there, the public started serving you back. He finished. Those 11 terms achieved what 60 minutes of debate could not. Pelosi's arm shifted without her actively ordering it to, grabbing the thin, shiny timepiece on her left arm, a long-standing habit of calming herself by rotating the strap a fraction of an inch. Then she realized where the lenses and every stare had tracked her movement, to the tiny, gleaming, costly object resting there. Gradually and intentionally, she pulled the edge of her cream-colored shirt down over the timepiece until it vanished, crossed both hands on her lap, and refrained from uttering a single extra syllable. The hiding of it spoke volumes louder than anything she might have uttered. When questioned if she wanted to answer, she refused. That picture played on every television in the nation by supper time. If it resonated with you, activate alerts right this second. The story of that historic afternoon definitely did not end the second the Madam Speaker fell into a shocked, beaten quietness. Very quickly, the hungry online world grabbed hold of the interaction. A carefully cut 90-second movie clip started spreading with intense speed, showing the exact destructive series of events. Senator Kennedy's slow Southern voice reading her passionate statement regarding all citizens paying a fair share right before the steady tap of his finger on the bold number showing a massive 54% stock profit. This video was everywhere, bleeding into every monitor and internet site before the hearing room had even totally cleared out its crowd. The most disturbing part for Pelosi was the total and complete lack of arguments about the law. The citizens of America weren't fighting about government rules or if lawmakers trading stocks was technically allowed. Instead, they were completely captivated by the absolute two-faced nature of the images. Millions observed a lawmaker who had earlier brushed off the country's money worries as simple jealousy be-faced with her own righteous words, brutally colliding with her own massive wealth statistics. The citizens watched as those two totally opposite facts stubbornly refused to match up or belong together. As a result, the big evening news channels scrapped their scheduled shows, deciding instead to start their nightly broadcasts with the picture of that solitary piece of paper and Kennedy's destructive 11 terms. By the moment the sun came up the next day, the political environment had permanently broken. The fresh, change-focused Democrat who had spoken up against the leadership during the meeting went officially on the record, using the energy to aggressively push her demand for a total prohibition on lawmakers buying and selling individual stocks. Her recorded message echoed strongly, moving much further and quicker around the country than the actual suggested law ever had. Still, underneath the justified anger rested a bleak, sour little joke concerning human behavior and current economics. In the direct wake of the widely shared clash, the different money companies and phone programs that let regular everyday investors closely follow and copy the speaker's market investments saw an unheard of, gigantic spike in fresh account creations. The exact event that was supposed to act as a deep insult had accidentally worked as the greatest commercial, aggressively reminding the whole nation just how incredibly profitable those exact market profits were. A working-class citizen who had wasted his day chuckling loudly at the video of Pelosi's public embarrassment was, by dinner time, busily installing a wealth tracking program focused on her investments. The mental reasoning behind this was savagely basic. 4% is purely 4%, and 54% is undeniably 54%. Every person in the nation suddenly, urgently desired a chair at her expensive table because Kennedy had made it crystal clear exactly how lucrative her private game genuinely was. The politician had definitely managed to embarrass her on a countrywide platform, and the nation had participated with him in chuckling at her expense, but afterward, the nation pulled a rapid turn, rushing wildly to jump straight into her stock accounts to partake in the winnings. It served as the ultimate pessimistic evidence of a global reality. The casino always triumphs. Away from the blinding bulbs of the meeting room, the brutal reality of the event was freely admitted. A veteran Democratic campaign planner, trapped by a journalist in the winding hallways of the Capitol building, softly confessed what the political insiders had deeply worried about for a long time. Everybody in Washington basically understood that this lawmaker stock trading problem would eventually turn into a disastrous political weakness. This planner sharply pointed out that in America, a lawmaker can effortlessly survive being incredibly rich, mostly because the voting public generally respects riches. But what a lawmaker fundamentally cannot outlast is the pairing of giving a preachy, fair share lecture while at the same time recording an unbelievable 54% yearly profit, particularly when a self-proclaimed ordinary guy equipped with nothing except a standard bank account and a fishing boat recites those two clashing realities back to back straight to your face. In that painful 90-second time frame, she was conclusively trapped, acting like the precise character she had burned 40 years, aggressively promising she was fighting. She was totally revealed as the supreme disconnected insider, the advantaged rulemaker, profiting from the exact structure she professed to oversee. This was an emergency resistant to normal political excuses. There is completely no carefully worded media statement, no smart proxy sent onto the weekend morning political discussion programs, and no wordy explanation that can possibly repair the damning truth of a solid, calculated figure stamped on a document right beside a meaningless political lecture. Having completely achieved the precise goal he had carefully planned upon walking into the meeting, Senator John Kennedy managed his much-awaited departure with the exact identical, deliberately slow, unhurried pace that had acted as the unquestionable signature of his whole destructive questioning. There were no dramatic speeches or flashy movements as he finished breaking down the influential political leader in front of him. Instead, his actions were defined by a silent, deadly exactness. He held that single, disastrous piece of paper, the exact document that had smoothly compared her high-minded words against her unbelievable money realities, and he creased it sharply and flawlessly down its middle line. With measured peace, he slipped the now folded document safely into the inside pocket of his custom suit coat, making sure it was hidden away just as silently as it had been shown. He then went on to simply stroll directly out of the grand meeting room, fundamentally refusing to speak a single extra word to anyone there. He did not stop for reporters, and he didn't give any casual comments to the shocked workers talking quietly among themselves. He casually walked past the messy, wild bursts of the gathered media cameras and totally ignored the quiet, heavy feeling of the leaders' seating area at the front of the space. There, Nancy Pelosi sat apparently paralyzed, a picture of frozen disbelief, her gaze fixed sharply and without blinking on the custom edge of her own cream-colored sleeve where she had just quickly concealed her pricey luxury timepiece from the public eye. It was completely known by every veteran watcher in the Capitol that she would, without a doubt, manage to politically outlast this vicious public clash. People of her massive importance and deeply rooted systemic influence always discover a method to survive the short-term crisis and keep their hold on power. Even so, an undeniable core break had occurred inside the very air of that room, letting loose a deep change in the political pull that absolutely could not be rolled back or erased. The perfect shield she had burned 40 years building had been permanently broken. Kennedy had ultimately gained exactly what he had walked into that space to get: a single sheet of normal printer paper, creased only one time, which materially held basically zero measurable heaviness. Still, it bore a massive, unmeasurable weight of honesty that echoed profoundly throughout the whole country. As the huge, grand stories of time have continually and again shown, the absolute heaviest, most important, and most deeply earth-shaking items in the universe almost never show up on a physical weighing device. They are judged instead by the destructive mark they create in the thoughts of the citizens. If this exhaustive and precise analysis of total political responsibility succeeded in putting even a brief smile on your face, it is crucial that you crush that like button right now. Acting this way guarantees that this important broadcast cuts through the computer algorithms and gets to millions more of those diligent, regular Americans who have burned their whole existences doing absolutely everything flawlessly correct. These are the people who have faithfully obeyed the regulations, only to be made to watch in silent hopelessness as the very disconnected elites who draft those government rules constantly become unfathomably wealthy. If you strongly feel that Senator Kennedy perfectly expressed the exact, painful anger that countless diligent citizens have been made to hold quietly in their stomachs for years, then let your opinion be known. Subscribe to this broadcast right this exact moment and go down into the comments area to drop one solitary, strong, and summarizing phrase: fair share. Having totally achieved the exact goal he had carefully planned before ever stepping inside that meeting room, Senator John Kennedy managed his exit with the exact, identical, unhurried, measured speed that had characterized his whole destructive questioning. There was no showing off, no dramatic waving of arms, and no arrogant ending words. Rather, his concluding moves were defined by a silent, deadly exactness. He slowly grabbed the solitary, disastrous piece of paper, the exact document that had so smoothly compared her high-minded political words against her unbelievable money realities, and he creased it cleanly and flawlessly down its middle line. With complete peace, he slipped the folded document safely into the inside pocket of his custom suit coat, hiding it away as silently as it had originally shown up. He then went on to stroll directly out of the meeting space without speaking a single extra word to anybody. He easily walked past the wild bursts of the camera equipment and totally ignored the silent, grand seat where Nancy Pelosi sat, apparently paralyzed, still looking sharply at the edge of her own cream-colored sleeve where she had quickly concealed her timepiece. It was completely known by every veteran watcher in Washington that she would naturally, politically outlast this vicious public clash. People of her massive importance and deeply rooted systemic influence always discover a method to survive the short-term crisis and keep their power. Still, an undeniable core change had happened inside the very air of that space, letting loose a deep shift that could never be totally erased. He had successfully gained exactly what he walked in for: a single sheet of normal paper, creased only once, which materially did not weigh one thing. However, as the grand stories of time have continually shown, the absolute heaviest and most important items in this universe almost never do. If this precise analysis of political responsibility caused you to smile even a single time, you need to smash that like button to guarantee this broadcast gets to more diligent individuals who have performed everything flawlessly correct while observing the rule makers constantly become wealthy. If you strongly feel that Senator Kennedy expressed the exact anger that millions of citizens have held quietly for decades, subscribe to this broadcast right now and drop one strong phrase in the comments area. Fair share. Spend a second to pass this deep breakdown to somebody who comprehends this core institutional injustice profoundly down in their very skeleton. Forward it to the individuals who feel the pain of observing the political upper class succeed while regular Americans constantly battle massively. Allow this story to act as a permanent memory that you were never the jealous individual. Sometimes, against all imaginable chances, the absolute most influential individual in the space gets totally broken down and defeated by a modest rural attorney equipped with a basic bank account, a fishing boat, and a solitary, carefully used piece of paper that successfully revealed the two-faced character of Washington elites for the whole watching country to observe and evaluate for their own sake.